Hey guys, it's Jordan, and today I'm going to be talking about different mediums that we use in artwork. A medium is just something that we use to create a piece of art. So it can be anything like paint, colored pencils, normal pencils. If you're a sculptor, you use clay and wire. It really varies depending on what kind of artwork you want to do. So I'm going to cover the things that I have currently available to me. It's not everything that you can work with. Like, I don't have anything to do sculpture with currently, so I can't show you how to set up your sculptures. But everything that I do have, I'll be explaining what it is and what you need to start with that medium. As always, if you really want to explore one of these mediums, get the things for yourself and look up some YouTube videos or research on Google to see pros and cons of that medium. Play with it a little bit and see if you really like it or not. It takes a lot to find what really works for you. Anyway, let's get started. So the first medium that I really want to cover is acrylic paints, which is pretty much the only paint that I use. And below I have a bunch of things that you use when you're using acrylic paints, and I'll be covering them each individually, as well as you can see some works that I've done with acrylic paints and what finished products will look like. So first we have the paints themselves, and you can either get a really big kit like this. This is all one kit, these black boxes that you see, and they're at Michael's usually. Or if you want to just start out basic and you don't really need a whole lot of colors, you can get these bigger tubes for a couple of bucks a piece. And the only colors you really need to start painting are Mars Black, Titanium White, Ultramarine, this Naphthol Crimson, also known as like Cadmium Red, and this really nice yellow, which is Cadmium Yellow Medium. If you get a hue, it's usually cheaper than if you get the paint straight up. And that goes for oil paint as well. And I'll be explaining that in a little bit. Next, you're going to need something to actually paint on. This can be done on thick paper, such as this Bristol board paper that I have, that I'll be using to demonstrate. You can paint on pieces of wood, like this. If you can see the little brown, that's actually wood. And this is actually spray paint, which is just another form of paint that comes in a can. Or the most popular way is on canvases. Canvas is just stretched fabric over a wooden base that has been stapled into place. And you can either stretch your own canvas, or you can buy them pre-stretched at most craft and art stores. So the next thing that you're going to need is things to actually paint with, and we call them brushes. And there's 1,000,001 different kinds. There's these really nice brushes that you buy individually, and they're really soft and good for like watercolors and acrylics. There's all-purpose medium brushes, which aren't that great quality, but you can get some really good use out of them as long as you take care of them. You can buy just the assorted packs of brushes, which is how I got most of these. It really doesn't matter. The only problem you're going to run into is if you buy the really low quality craft brushes, the hairs might start to fall out and get into your painting, so it's something to be aware of. Another thing about brushes, if you're getting kids kits or you're just buying pre-kits, you'll get these little brushes. These are horrible. Really don't use them for acrylics or oils. These are great for like a watercolor brush, but don't use them with anything really thick. Otherwise, you're gonna have a bad time. I'm just warning you. Just bad times all around. In addition to brushes, you're going to need a palette, which can either be these really cute little plastic ones with plastic lids that you can get at Michael's for like $2. Or you can just use a paper plate. You can use a scrap piece of paper. You can pretty much use anything as long as it will hold the paint. The problem with not getting the palettes with lids is that your paint will dry out very quickly. Acrylics dry like nobody's business. You can lay down a layer of acrylic, come back 10 minutes later, and it's completely dry. This is actually why I prefer acrylic paint, because it does dry so fast, so it's really good if you want to do a very fast layered painting, which is where you're just going to put down a background color and then add details in layers, kind of like how you do for Photoshop. The final things you're going to need before you start painting is some kind of container to hold your water, which could be something like I just showed you with a lid, or it can just be a plastic cup if you have one, or even a normal cup, just don't drink out of it. Go find an artist friend and ask them how many times they've accidentally drank paint water. It is shocking that we are all still alive. Next, you're going to need a palette knife. I have this really nice metal one, but you can get a set of plastic ones for a couple of bucks at Michael's, and I'm sure AC Moore has them too, and a pencil. That way you can draw out your designs and work on them before you decide to lay down some paint. Okay, so I just drew this really quick, really simple little flower, and I'm going to show you guys how to basically start painting a piece that you've drawn. So you want to take your paint and put them into your palette. If you're on a paper plate, it's fine, just spread them out a little bit so you have room to mix colors. Now in my last video, I covered what colors to put together to mix them, but I didn't actually show you how we mix paint. That's what I want to cover really, really fast and show you how we apply paint to a piece of paper or a canvas or a piece of wood. So all I do is I take my palette knife and I scoop up a little bit of the color that I want, place it next to whatever color I want to mix it with, and kind of push them together with the palette knife until they start to become, you know, one homogeneous color, where I can't really see these stripes of red or white anymore. And it all depends on your preference. Like, I don't really care about these little bits on the side, but you might. I know that if you touch that with your brush, you are going to get streaks, so, you know, user beware. Now I have this really pretty pink color, but it's a little too bright for the whole flower. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of this pink and move it over here. Now what I'm going to do is take a little bit of this blue, just a little, and play around and try to make a more muted or darker color. And if you look, we're starting to make a lavenderish violet color, which will be good for any shading, really dark shading that I want to do with this. Now I can go back and forth and mix these as much as I want. I can mix a million colors if I want. I have this black here to try to make things darker if I do. Use black very, very sparingly because it can ruin an entire piece really quickly. So I'm going to take a little bit and mix it over here and make this really muted, gloomy, kind of gray lavender color. And that's just how you mix your paints on a palette. Alright, so I have my palette with my paint, some brushes here in this jar, and also some that I picked out that I think might be helpful, as well as my little water container about halfway full. You don't want to fill it all the way to the very top because when you go to rinse your brushes, you are going to splash water everywhere. Believe me. So all you want to do to start painting is pick out a brush that you want to use. I'm going to use this very tiny brush, which is really good for line work. I'm going to wet it in my water and pick up a little bit of color and then just apply it to whatever I'm painting. Alright, so I painted this one little section in so I can show you what flat color will look like. There's no real bumps here and everything is one solid opaque color. So I take my brush and I just kind of spin it around in my water and you can actually see the paint come off. Now I just have a nice clean wet brush and I'm going to dip into this purplish shade. Ideally, you want to wait for these colors to dry in between if you're layering. So I would paint everything pink that I want pink first and then go on my purple. But for the sense of time, I'm going to just do them on top of one another and hope for the best. So let's say down here, I want this to be a little darker. I'll just take my color and push it around and put it where it needs to go. And the more that I rub this around, the more water will actually dilute the paint to make it a little transparent. So it looks shaded even though it's just two colors together. That's your basics of painting. You can mix colors in different shades all you need to. If you're not sure what colors make the color that you need, go ahead and watch my last tutorial. But this is pretty much what you need to get started. To clean your brushes, you just want to take them to the sink along with your water jar. Run them under some warm water with a little bit of dish soap or even hand soap and it'll come right out. To clean your palettes, little known fact, Lysol wipes actually work really good with some warm water and dish soap to get every little bit of paint out of this palette. If you're using a paper plate, you can just throw it away. Okay, so the next thing we have is oil paint, and unfortunately I am not going to be covering a full demo and everything like I did for acrylics because I do not have all the materials to safely oil paint right now. You need things like Turbinoid, you need several jars, you need linseed oil. All of these things I don't really have, and they're not super cheap. But basically, oil paint comes in these little tiny tubes. One tube can be like $14. It stains any fabric that it touches, and the only way to get rid of it is by cutting the fabric. They're not great. I'm very biased because I do not like working with oils, as I previously stated. I do not recommend them for beginners. Depending on what you're using to do oil paintings, you can actually set things on fire accidentally by leaving them in the sunlight. If you have Turbinoid all over a rag because you were cleaning your brushes and you leave it out in the sun for a couple hours, it can combust. Don't use these if you're a beginner. If you want to use these as a beginner, please talk to someone that uses oils very frequently. Talk to a painting professor. Go on YouTube and look up people that professionally do oils and get some tips. I'm not the person to talk to about it because I don't use them. And I'm just very biased. Alright, so next up we have pencils, both color pencils and normal drawing pencils. They're really, really easy for people who are just learning how to draw and learning how to shade and everything like that. Color pencils are great to plan out colors for paintings, but they're also really good as a standalone medium. This is what a colored pencil drawing can look like if you really put time and effort into it. Everything here was done with colored pencil. There's no markers, no paint, just pencil, and then that's why it's shiny, because it was printed, scanned and printed in. So as you can see here, I have a box of just normal Artist Loft colored pencils, which are a couple of bucks at Michael's, and I have a drawing kit that has pencils and charcoal and some paper blenders. First, I'm quickly going to go over this box here and everything that's in it. So we have these pencils, and when you get a kit like this, they'll all have little numbers and letters on them. What this means is that how hard or soft the pencil is. So this is a 4H, it's a really hard pencil. That's about as dark as I can get with this 4H. Now an HB is pretty much your normal number 2 pencil. I can start out really light and get really super dark down in here. We also have a charcoal pencil. Or actually, this is a pure graphite pencil, forgive me. And this is super, super soft, and we can get really, really dark shading out of it. This kit also has these graphite sticks, which are labeled with how hard or soft they are. This is a medium, so it behaves just like a pencil, and I can get super dark in here if I want to, or I can go lighter. Because it's medium, it's in between. They also gave me these charcoal sticks. We actually call this vine charcoal. And they're these very thin sticks that are really easy to break. And charcoal isn't really my favorite because it gets everywhere. But it's really good for sketching out paintings. You can get these really super nice little chalky lines that won't show up when you paint over it. And you can also work in some really super, super dark shading. In these kits, they also give you a pencil sharpener. While this is a good pencil sharpener, I highly recommend getting an electric sharpener because you're going to be using it a lot if you decide to work with pencils quite often. And then usually you get this little block. And for the longest time, I had no clue what this is, but if you take this paper off, it's actually sandpaper. Now what this is used for is you'll get a newspaper textured blender. It's like a long tube with pointed ends. Now what you do is when it gets dirty, you rub this along the sandpaper and it'll clean it for you so you can keep using it. I would only really say use these if you're doing an underpainting for like an oil painting. Any other time, really, if you just go to the dollar store and get one of these cheap mechanical pencils, you'll be fine. If you're doing just a drawing, it's hard to get super dark, so maybe a mechanical pencil and then a 4B or a 5B would just be perfect for you. Alright, so to use a colored pencil, I just drew this really quick orange and I picked out a couple of colors. I'm not going to do a full drawing like I did for the acrylics. Like, I'm not going to finish any of these really. They're just demonstrations. So what I do is I find a really light version of whatever color I need the entire thing to be. And I just full on get up in there and cover every inch that I can. I'm trying to make like a nice even coat here. Doesn't have to be fully perfect because you're going to put in highlights and lowlights and all that other good stuff, midtones, the penumbra, all of that later on. So I have this nice little basic shade of an orange, right? Now what I want to do is take something closer to the actual color that I want it to be, which is this really bright orange. And I kind of lay that down in the middle, because it's our midtone. It's the color that the object actually is. Now, you don't really want to do this up and down motion when you're coloring something. I'm just doing this for demonstration. What you want to do is follow your drawing, so you actually want to curve it more like this. And you'll see what kind of difference that makes. I want to make it slightly darker around the edges, but not super opaque. And I go up a little bit because this is going to be darker. This is going to be pretty dark. Same with this. If you feel like you've gone a little too dark with your shading, you can take your original color and just go over it a little bit more, and it'll bring it out a little more. So if I'm just sitting here working with it a little bit, I've lightened up this shade exponentially to where you can actually see where this is an orange being shaded. Cast light is coming from over here somewhere, making this the darkest part. Over here would be my highlight, which I'll use a little bit of yellow for, because anything that's orange really has yellow in it too. It's just like a trick that every artist knows. If you're shading anything that's orange, you want to use yellow for your highlights and then blue for your lowlights. But I would keep working on this until everything was blended nice and neat and I have something that I'm happy with. All of this is colored pencil that was just blended for hours and hours. Like I said, colored pencil is really easy to work with. It's really fun and super fast, and you don't have to wait for anything to dry. I recommend it as a good starting tool if you want to work with color but you're scared of paint. But it's really up to you. Okay, so next I would normally do markers, which are just your standard Crayola markers, but I don't use markers as markers. I kind of make my own watercolor with them. So I'm going to cover that in a separate video called DIY watercolors using washable markers. And I'll also briefly be covering these micro pens that you can get for $3 at Five Below for detail work. Alright guys, so the last thing that I really want to cover is watercolor pencils. This is something actually pretty new to me, as I only really discovered them a couple of years ago. And I haven't used them a whole lot, but I do enjoy them. So they function just like normal colored pencils, except they also are watercolors, which is a little weird. Alright, so now I'm just going to show you two different ways that you can use watercolor pencils. I drew this really simple leaf that really doesn't have anything to it. I'm taking this lime green watercolor pencil, and I'm going to color half of this leaf in like I would with normal colored pencils. I'm just really quickly doing this. I'm going to take this black color and do this stem and do not detail work, like the really fine lines, but I want to know where they're going to be at. And then I'll take this blue color. I'll just kind of add some very, very fast shading up in here, following my veins down to here. And now what I'm going to do is take a very soft brush that I would use for normal watercolor paintings, dampen it with a little bit of water, make sure there's not a lot on there, and I'm just going to run it over the colored pencil. And what's going to happen is it's going to behave very similar to normal watercolor. If you have too much water, it's going to run, kind of like how mine did, but as you can see, I now have a shaded in leaf. The other way to do it, which is a little more risky, and I don't really do it often, is by dipping the pencil straight into water. So what I do is I take my pencil, swish it around like I'm cleaning a brush to get it nice and wet, and as you watch, it's much softer. I actually need to wet it a little bit more, and it's going to give me this nice effect. So I just go in, dipping my pencil when I need to. Ideally, you let these soak for a little bit, but you can also just do this. And then I can color in as if I was just painting, which is helpful, but as you can see, it's hard to get an even coat unless your pencil is really, really soaked. And this also kills your pencils a little bit faster than just coloring and putting water over top the other way I showed you. So this is pretty much what it looks like if you do dipped compared to if you just put everything down first. I'm going to put in a little bit of black and blue like I did for the other just to show you. Dipping my black in very lightly, I'm going to draw my little lines. And then dipping my blue in, we're going to try to put a little bit of shading in here. So we start off down here, up into here. So the perk of doing it wet is that you get much more vibrant colors, as you can see here. But I don't really like the effect it gives. So you can see this is now kind of messed up and very like blunt, whereas this side is a little more subtle. But you can also mix it. So I'm taking this still wet blue colored pencil, kind of going in here and just darkening up the areas that I want to be a little more blue. It's all about finding whatever works best for you. Whatever effect that you want is what you want to strive for. So that's how you use watercolor pencils. So that's it. That's all the mediums that I have available to me that I can show you how to use and what the basics of them are. If you have any questions, as always, do your research. Go on YouTube. It's a great source because you have video and audio playing, so it'll show you and tell you what to do. Google is another great one. You can look up art pages and research there. Once this whole quarantine situation is over, you can go ahead and go into a local craft or art store and ask them what the limitations of your medium is. You want to play around with your medium and see how it works for you. Everyone's a little bit different. So make sure that you're really becoming familiar with it. I hope you found this information helpful and that you'll stay tuned for some more helpful videos from me. Until then, I guess I'll see you next time. Bye!